We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. It's Thursday, March 12th, 2026, and today we're going to be covering down how the White House has now told congressional Republicans, do not talk about mass deportations. There's been no accountability for government gangsters. Los Angeles is ground zero for hospice fraud. We're celebrating January 6th, and then we're going to compare and contrast two of America's most important states. Let's get after it. I do not like half measures. They very rarely work out for you. I mean, we just got through the Valentine's Day season. In the Friend household, we actually celebrate a different date. March 8th is the International Women's Day. It's, as an aside, one of my favorite facts is that the communists over in Europe tried to get the women to all unionize and push back against the man and strike. And they marked March 8th as the day to do that. And then the ladies just said, nah, we just kind of want another day of flowers and chocolates and attention from our male counterparts. So that's actually what it evolved into. And Madam Friend, being from Ukraine, celebrates March 8th, which is good for me because I don't have to buy flowers with all you other gents on February 14th. But we just got through Valentine's Day. Can you go half measure on Valentine's Day? I mean, hey, hon, I got you a card, and maybe we'll go to Applebee's tonight. Is that going to go well for you? Would you be better off having just forgotten the entire holiday? Probably. Can you go half measure at a job? I mean, I show up on time half of the time. Is the boss going to be pleased with that? Let's say you're really interested in fitness. Let's say you put on a few extra LBs over the holidays, new year, new you. Are you going to monitor your diet half of the day? Are you going to reach your successful goals there for fitness? No, half measures don't work. Now, let's look through the analogy that I've been trying to hammer home about the football game for some of the stories I want to cover down on today. We got the big game coming up, right? Midterm election year. The question is Donald Trump, who's mean, orange, and literally Hitler in the eyes of the communists, is he going to have 2 more years to do something, or is he just going to be a lame duck January 2027 if the Republicans lose control of the House and the Senate? Now, in order to do that, they can't just have the pep rally. They can't tell the fans, we need you on your feet tomorrow to impact this game, because if they do that, and they failed to deliver on some of the measurable asks of the American people, then people aren't going to show up to the game. They're not going to be at the ballot box. They're going to sit on their hands. They're just going to sit out entirely. Now, what were the 3 things that we covered down on? Mass deportations, de-weaponizing the government, and putting some government gangsters in handcuffs. You only got about 6 or 7 months. Election season is upon us. You haven't delivered yet, and it looks like half measure at best on some of the stuff. So without further ado, let's get to our first piece of the day, which comes from the New York Times, at one point a newspaper. Headline reads, Judge halts Trump administration move to restrict immigration appeals. Now, this district judge, his name is Randolph Moss, shocker, appointed by Barack Obama in Washington, D.C. Now, the Trump administration, in a good faith effort, tried to change some of the ways that they were reducing the time that people had to appeal their deportation orders. Now, typically, you have a certain amount of time. You can submit it to the immigration court, and the days were 30 days. You have 1 calendar month to appeal. And the Trump administration, in an effort to get more illegal aliens moved out of the country, try to set a new rule or amend an existing rule, go from 30 days to 10 days. There is a logjam right now of over 200,000 deportation cases currently sitting in the immigration courts. And this is going to be a way to expedite that process. Now, because the communists know what to do, they got to throw up as many roadblocks as they possibly can to hinder the initiative, to hinder the mass deportations the American people required of their government when we sent the mandate last November 2024. They're going to bring forth as many actions as they can in court. So this communist judge got his crack at it, and he said, nope, nope. Trump administration erred. They didn't put the rule change out for the necessary amount of time for public comment. That was the rationale that he used, because communists get elected and appointed to do something. They use the levers of power, try to make it look like it's a legitimate effort, good faith effort by the judge there. But an Obama appointee, no, he just wants 30, 40, 50 million aliens kicking it around this country. Now, that's one judge. There was also another judge whose name is Sunshine Sykes. Yes, her name is Sunshine Sykes, a Biden appointee. She's in California, and she's now required immigrants, according to the New York Times, illegal aliens. They are supposed to be given bond hearings, which would mean that if ICE immigration winds up arresting an illegal alien, somebody who is in this country illegally, didn't come through the front door, and they get apprehended, as opposed to immediately jettisoning them out of the country, ejecting them, marching them Trail of Tears down to the Rio Grande, they get a chance to bond out. This is somebody who knows that they're in the country illegally. Nobody woke up and said, oh, I didn't know. I thought I was an American this entire time. They've been evading American law enforcement. And now the federal judge says, well, you get a chance to bond out. And I guess then check in with your probation officer? No, just abscond entirely. So the entire effort was done away with. And again, 200,000 deportation cases are currently in the backlog. Now, half measures. I think this was a good faith effort to reduce the amount of time, the amount of administrative rigmarole that is going on in the courts. Okay, that's good. Only 200,000? There's 50 million illegal aliens in the country. Where are the mass deportations? Where is the volume of cases so much that it creates an emergency and the judge has no choice but to just allow it to be reduced, not from 30 days to 10, but how about 10 minutes? How about zero time to appeal? We've done our due diligence. We've gathered all the necessary intelligence, and we have determined that you are in our country illegally. You're gone. No appeal necessary. Due process doesn't mean one thing or another. It just means that there is a process. Establish a process for the timely ejection of all the illegal aliens. Half measure, not good enough. And really, what kind of effort are we seeing in order to get a backlog of 200,000 deportations? Well, we're seeing some other things going on from the Department of Homeland Security, which is still out there publishing this, which they did yesterday, day before, I don't know, timestamp wise. This went out on their social media, on their Twitter account from the Department of Homeland Security. It's a nice photo. It says, free ticket home, $2,600 exit bonus. Because your Department of Homeland Security, an agency that gets funded by you, the taxpayer, because your government steals your money, taxes it, or inflates the currency, or borrows money, in effect, making the money in your bank account worth less and worth less until it becomes worthless, to fund this agency, to do something that is part of its actual charge as the federal government, to eject illegal aliens from our country. And still, have you checked a calendar? It's March 2026. They've been at this now for over a year, and they're still offering bribe money for illegal aliens to leave the country. Anyone who was going to take that deal would have already taken it. There were people that said, I'm probably on the radar. I can sort of sense them. My spidey senses are going off. I'm just going to take the money and run. Who is going to take this deal now? Have we made the current conditions in the country so inhospitable to illegal aliens that they're now saying, I was going to chance it, but Have you seen how many millions that they've ejected from the country? I better get it while the getting is good. Just get that money and go home. The $2,600 comes in addition to a free flight home, courtesy of the American taxpayer. Now, the job that our federal government is doing on one of its few legitimate charges that we demand of it is so poor on this football game analogy, the mass deportations. We failed so badly that actually the White House wants to pivot away from the messaging right now. So this came as a scoop over at Axios, which is also interesting because I believe Donald Trump reads Axios. It makes sense. It's kind of the online version of USA Today. All the stories can be read in about 1 minute or less. Headline: White House tells House Republicans to stop talking about mass deportations. Why would that be? I thought we were doing all the hashtag winning. I thought we were getting tired of winning as so much awesome stuff has happened. Well, the deputy chief of staff, James Blair, privately urged House Republicans to stop emphasizing mass deportations and instead focus their messaging on removing violent criminals, according to sources in this closed door briefing that went down in southern Florida. Now, the deputy chief of staff, again, James Blair, also told members to go out and, quote, find real Americans to highlight the wins in the GOP's sweeping legislative package passed last year. That's the one big, beautiful bill. So the White House, the executive branch, Article 2 powers, has now unofficially acknowledged its failures to carry forward mass deportations. They know it's a stinker. They know that they have not fulfilled that pledge. Donald Trump was elected on a mandate of mass deportations. We have not seen anything close to what the American people expected and demand. And it's in the very finite amount of responsibilities that we actually expect of our government. And now we're going to go half measure even on that. We're going to say, well, we had a mega, mega Doppler success of ejecting the violent criminals. I don't need you to delineate between what one criminal illegal alien is and another criminal illegal alien. If you want to prioritize the real evildoers, I guess that's okay. But are you going to do that at the detriment of, well, we're going to ignore the giant swath of people over here? It's Minneapolis all over again. We had to send Tom Homan up there to do a Dunkirk and say, we actually won, even though we're on this little sliver of beach and we're evacuating the European continent. This is actually a victory, America. We're doing so, so well. We've gotten 1,000 or so violent criminals. Meanwhile, we're leaving 90,000 illegal aliens in this city. It's not a win. The Republicans know it, and they're trying to pivot their messaging over to something else where they can actually claim a win, which is the one big, beautiful bill which just spent a butt ton of money and made the dollars in your bank account worth less until it became worthless because of inflation. So that's a half measure. It's a half of a half measure. And that's just, that dog's not going to hunt. Now, immigration issues aside, let's talk about some government gangsters. And I mean, this one is not necessarily an individual who's been legitimately accused of committing a crime, but when there's a lot of smoke, you can't help but think this person had to be involved with something. And that's Valerie Jarrett. And it's just a great example of how communists reward their friends and punish their enemies. So a headline comes from Fox News. Valerie Jarrett earned $740,000 as Obama insiders filled top roles during an $850 million presidential center build. This is connected to the presidential library being built in Chicago on behalf of former President Barack Obama. This building is costing almost $1 billion. Now, didn't come out of my pocket. People donated to it. I don't know why. I guess they still see him as the guy standing in front of the fake Parthenon, pledging to make the sea levels seep away or something. I don't know. Valerie Jarrett, close personal confidant and advisor to Barack Obama. Do you think she might have been in the room when they were talking about what they were going to do with the Russiagate stuff? Oh, yeah. Yeah. But what do communists do? They reward their friends. She was a good and faithful servant. certainly not looking at any sort of criminal investigation or an indictment nonetheless over the horizon. So what's she doing right now? She's overseeing the Obama Foundation's construction of this monstrosity in Chicago and making a pretty penny doing it. $750,000 to just hang out. I mean, do you think that she's hammering nails in there to hold the structure up? No. She's probably just going out there doing fundraising, glad handing, having some nice rubber chicken dinners, being congratulated on the fantastic job she's done. And look, I can't even be specific to Valerie Jarrett. She's making a ton of money, no question. She's making more than most, but not that much more. So Fox News actually tries to characterize it as worse than it actually is. And to our half measures, I'm going to have to name check Fox on this because they say, well, Valerie Jarrett is the worst offender of this one because she's so far off what others have earned in the past. So they point to other presidents who did their presidential library. So let's go back to Barack Obama's predecessor, George W. Bush. Presidential Center reported that the CEO was paid $661,000. 740,000, 661,000. Potatoes. I know that one is more than the other, but they're both a ton of money to basically have a do nothing job. And the Reagan Foundation, they pay about $500,000. And the Clinton Foundation said that they compensate their CEO less than $500,000. Nothing specific. I mean, it could be $499,000, but hey, Bill and Hillary, I guess they're being fiscally responsible with the donations they're bringing in, or they're just a bunch of cheapos who like to keep it to themselves. Now, those are examples of the government gangster class. We haven't gotten allegations against Valerie Jarrett, but certainly Bill and Hillary are a little bit of hot water. But are they really going to be held accountable? Let's, though, focus in on one of the biggest government gangsters that we were said, this guy is going down. Now, what brought it to my attention was not because it's recent, it just came across my social media feed because that's what goes on these days. That's sort of how the way I go about trying to aggregate topics to talk about you here on the American Radicals podcast every weekday on rumble.com/AmRadPod, YouTube at AmRadPod, and Spotify. Guys, if you haven't already, here's your nice reminder. Please, at some point this week, go over to Spotify, AmRadPod, follow the channel, pull it up. I don't even care if you turn the volume on. Just let it play. Let's see if we can't get that thing built out. But what about, as we're talking about government gangsters, Adam Schiff? I think he was an entire chapter of Kash Patel's book entitled Government Gangsters. Remember we were promised his scalp? And what's the status of that? So, first, a refresher, because a whistleblower came forward probably 6 or 7 months ago. It was a Democrat whistleblower, so it was legitimate, right? And this individual, who we still don't know their identity, said that Adam Schiff was leaking classified material in order to damage Donald Trump. And we had this great and huge revelation. Here's Jonathan Turley filling us in on it.
It doesn't get much more serious than that. The chairman of the House Intel Committee doesn't have declassification authority over these types of documents. They are made available to Congress under very tightly controlled rules. This has been a source of tension for years. And members of both parties have gone out of their way to assure that this material would be closely held and not weaponized. Schiff was viewed as one of the most political chairs of that committee in its history. And this is a truly chilling account, if true. Now, when I first read it, frankly, I was taken aback because it's perfectly moronic to commit such a felony with a planning conference meeting with staff. That's not usually how things are leaked in Washington, D.C. What makes this different, Will, is that this was a statement made to FBI agents. The person who made this statement was no doubt aware that lying to FBI agents is not just a crime, but a crime that was repeatedly prosecuted during prior administrations.
All right, that's enough sort of as a recap on what the allegations were. So this whistleblower came forward to the FBI. I mean, I think that's more of a witness to a crime than a whistleblower, but however they want to characterize them, I guess. And Jonathan Turley mentions this individual came to the FBI, and they had to be telling the truth. We know, because nobody ever lies to the FBI. I mean, come on. But we had the director of the FBI go out and substantiate it. So this came from last August from at FBI Director Cash, because Director Cash Patel is a douche who goes by his first name. And he put out on his social media the following post. Quote, "We found it. We declassified it. Now Congress can see how classified info was leaked to shape political narratives and decide if our institutions were weaponized against the American people." There's that word, weaponized. And you can see he is highlighting this piece over at Just the News, which is the headline. It's an exclusive because Kash Patel and John Solomon are besties, totes besties. Headline, Democrat whistleblower told FBI that Schiff okayed leaking classified intel to hurt Trump. Well, the memos from this Democrat staffer claim that Adam Schiff instructed his staff to leak classified information. The whistleblower spoke to the FBI 2 times, 2017 and 2023. And then they make sure to add over at Just the News that House Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan, Jim spelled with a G, expressed an interest in having this whistleblower testify to his committee, because where does it always go? And where is it actually going per the FBI director? The FBI director, who oversees a federal law enforcement agency that investigates violations of federal law and brings those investigations over to the Department of Justice, United States attorney's offices, in order to prosecute people for violating federal law. There was no case file brought to the United States attorney, Director Cash. No? What did you do instead? Oh, you brought it to Congress because you want to be transparent. No, you brought it to Congress so that nothing happens. Another half measure. The half measure is, we gave you the name, we gave you the narrative that you knew all along, and then there's no follow-up at all, no accountability. In fact, this is actually benefiting Adam Schiff. Not only is he not being criminally charged, not only are no investigations happening, not only is this going to benefit his counterparts in the lower chamber, because now he's Senator Adam Schiff, and Jim Jordan, Jim spelled with the G, is going to have lots of hearings, and he's going to get on Fox News, and he's going to fundraise off of it. So lots of benefit going around. The media really benefits. You got John Solomon, totes besties with Kash Patel. He gets the exclusive report, and then Kash Patel can say, I brought you transparency. Again, half the measure, no accountability attached to that transparency. But what is the actual fallout of this? Well, Adam Schiff has now stood up, currently operating a legal defense fund. So this comes from notus.org, headline, Adam Schiff forms legal defense fund to prepare for Trump attacks. Well, it's doing pretty well at last measure, actually. So as of the end of 2025, so for the time period between late August, when he stood this up, and December 31st, 2025, he raised $1.2 million. That came in the form of 400 political committees, individual donors, even an Indian tribe. And he's spent about $750,000 so far in legal defense. Now, look, if he's hiring attorneys, I guess that's what they're billing the rates out at. But what's included in that piece is that some of that money went to Act Blue. So they're getting out the vote with a legal defense fund. And other money went to, how do they characterize it? It was fundraising platform consulting. So they're spending money on how to raise more money for themselves so that they can enrich their buddies, because that's what communists do. Like, let's make sure that we fund our attorneys, who then kick it back to our coffers when they donate to our campaigns. And then also, we can get out the vote. So no accountability. And this half measure, this threat to go get this guy, what do they say? Adam Schiff, he's the pencil-necked guy. The threat was there. The transparency was there. A half measure has now resulted in zero accountability. And this guy's got over $1 million war chest that he can spend for whatever he wants. Now, Adam Schiff represents the state of California. It is ceded territory. It's a communist enclave. But as we're talking about getting rid of weaponized government, I'm going to sort of add an addendum to that. Wasteful government. I mean, the government entity like the FBI is weaponized. It's also extremely wasteful. I want to see both of those things picked up here. We were promised the Doge, Department of Government Efficiency. Elon Musk, he was there for like 3 months with the chainsaw and said, we're going to cut government. And then it didn't really happen. We got rid of USAID and still spent the money. And a lot of the cuts were sent right back to those agencies and they just spent it on something else. We didn't actually get the cuts. Again, half measures, but wasteful government. So a piece just came out from CBS News about Los Angeles, the biggest city in the state that Adam Schiff currently represents at the United States Senate. It's an investigation. Headline: We visited ground zero for hospice fraud, Los Angeles, California. Well, Steve, why are you going to talk about hospice fraud in California? That's not important to me. I'm an American. I don't live in California. Why is that important? Because they get federal dollars. So they actually do tax your money so that it could support this fraud that's been going on, or frauds, we'll say. But it's a very interesting piece. CBS News did a deep dive and investigative report, and I think it's worth just educating if you happen to miss this story. Because Medicare is federally administered, but hospices are certified for reimbursements by the states. I mean, the states kind of like issue the licenses for hospices. It doesn't come from the federal government as far as getting a license to operate a hospice. Hospice fraud nationally, just not specific to California, it's like over $200 million a year. Now, here's some red flags that CBS News was able to uncover when they went into Los Angeles to find out just how bad the hospice care was. So in the last 16 years, there's been a 1,500% increase in hospices. Red flags include clusters, which means that there's a whole bunch of these places in a very confined geographical area. That's a red flag. I mean, how many, is there a street that represents like a hospice row, like car dealerships, like you have in your town? You go by, oh, there's the Ford dealership, there's the Chevy dealership, there's a hospice, and there's a hospice, and there's a hospice. That's not really a thing. It's actually a red flag. In Los Angeles, they have clusters, 500 hospices in a 3-mile radius, and they had 137 on one street, like it's a Chevy dealership and a Ford dealership. Red flags. Multiple hospices in one building. You have an office complex, and really, you're going to have a competition one floor to the next? Yeah. Actually, there was one building with 89 hospices in it. They're overbilling. They're doubling, like 2.5 times the amount of billing that nationwide you typically see from hospices. Again, more red flags. Sharing staff. There were people employed by 5, 6, 7 hospice care places, which doesn't make any sense mathematically because you're typically working at a hospice like 20 to 40 hours a week. There's not enough hours in the week to justify that. Low patient counts. They're not actually getting a lot of people in there. And then my favorite is they're discharging patients alive. I mean, I can understand a miracle or two, but apparently in Los Angeles, it was miraculous. They was just coming down from heaven. People were just walking in and then walking out under their own power of hospices. Auditors estimated that Los Angeles overbilled Medicare by $105 million in just 1 year. That's the level of corruption, of wastefulness. Remember, waste, fraud, and abuse? Fraud's a crime. Where are the prosecutions? We should eliminate the waste, and then we need the accountability. We have neither in this case so far. I believe locally, they're looking at charging cases in Los Angeles. What is your confidence level in a county prosecutor in Los Angeles bringing forward a judicious, successful prosecution of someone who's been bilking the federal taxpayers, who have elected a mean orange, literally Hitler representative to the White House? 0 to none. I mean, the chances of somebody walking out of hospice are probably on par with the successful prosecution in Los Angeles. Exactly. Where's the actual fraud investigation from a robust federal law enforcement agency? Nothing. Nothing. Not even a half measure. and along weaponized government. One of the big things that people wanted was accountability and transparency connected to elections. At least shore up our elections. Why do we have an election season to begin with? It's ridiculous. People are going to the polls for weeks and months on end. Why do we have mail in ballots? Remember the safest and most secure election in 2020 when we all went to bed and one guy was ahead and we all woke up and the other guy was ahead and they were boarding up windows while they were counting? We had all these questions. Mail in ballots. You got to be kidding me. So there's this thing that's been proposed. It's actually been passed in the House of Representatives and the Senate's considering it, the Save America Act, which will require some modicum of oversight and shoring up our elections. Now, what are the Republicans doing here? They passed it through one chamber, but it's with the upper chamber right now, and that chamber is overseen by one John Thune, who is standing firm on Save America Act as Trump threatens legislative blockade. This comes from CBS as well. The Save Act, which was passed by the House a month ago, requires proof of citizenship to register to vote. Objectively good. It also requires photo ID. Objectively good. But Mr. Trump has demanded that the legislation go farther and ban all mail-in ballots. Yes, because that's how you would secure an election. Those are all objectively good and reasonable measures. And yet, the United States Senate has punted. Thus far, we have not gotten any progress on it. In fact, they tried to do some weird negotiation thing, and it was tied to electing the senator down in Texas. They said, look, if we'll give you John Cornyn back to represent Texas if you give us the SAVE Act. And John Thune said, no, we don't care about him that much. I guess it doesn't speak very well of Ken Paxton because he's the big opponent for John Cornyn. I guess John Thune thinks like, potato. It's one big party and you ain't in it. And these guys are just a dime a dozen. So what's going to be the ramifications of that half measure? We got half of it passed, right? Half the houses of Congress. No further progress, no further securing of our elections. So you paid attention to what you're reading for half the time. It means you're just going to be a giant 400-pound person. It's all or nothing. We haven't gotten anything because we've gotten only half measures. Now, another big thing for me on weaponized government, this one comes from the Washington Post. Headline: long delayed January 6th plaque honoring police installed in the Capitol at 4 a.m. And the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness, is decrying how this was just a dishonorable action on behalf of our elected betters because they should have done some sort of MAGA Doppler huge ceremony instead of putting it up on the wall at 4 a.m. on a Saturday. Because a law was passed like 4 years ago, said that this plaque had to be on the wall and it got delayed. But you should know that senators, not members of the House, but senators passed by unanimous consent earlier this year in January when the Senate was controlled by the Republicans to actually put the plaque up on display until they could get a permanent location in the House. No corrective action on January 6th, writ large. I mean, this is ceremonial. This is annoying. They talk about Brian Sicknick dying. Remember when they told us that guy got hit in the head with a fire extinguisher? It was a complete lie. And then they cremated his body so that no verification could happen. He died of a stroke the next day. And then all the other cops who died on January 6th, no, they committed suicide in the days after. And it was not connected to January 6th at all. Remember that? Remember the canard that we were thrown? The narrative. We had to preserve the narrative per Nancy Pelosi. Where is the accountability? We got a half measure. We got pardons for just about everyone, including some dirtbags. But when the government is weaponized, it's the government's fault. When Bill Cosby sexually assaults women, but then a prosecutor makes a deal with him, say, tell me what happened and I won't use it against you, and then uses it against him, that's on the government. You messed up the process. So when he goes free, it's the government's fault. Same thing applies to January 6th. So we got a half measure. We got pardons. We got some commutations. Some of those commutations, not good enough. But where is the other side of that? Where's the other side of the coin? for the agents of the government, be they in law enforcement or prosecutors, who manipulated evidence, who weaponized the system to go after people for things that weren't crimes at all. How about Brian Cole Jr. right now, currently sitting in incarceration, the January 5th/6th pipe bomber, who our government, our DOJ, our FBI, under the leadership of Director Cash and former co-deputy director Dan Bongino, have assured us that an autistic 30-year-old My Little Pony fan dropped some non-viable pipe bombs more than 5 years ago in one of the most surveilled cities on earth and eluded and evaded an $11 billion law enforcement agency for a half a decade, having never changed his habit of life, having used his own car and credit card and cell phone. And he was driving at the time that the pipe bomber was walking on the street. We're supposed to follow up with that? We're supposed to believe that? Ridiculous, absurd. It's disgusting. The half measures that have been attached to January 6th are legion. And look, I'm personally invested in it. There's a reason that I'm sitting here talking to you, which I love to do every weekday here on the American Radicals podcast. It's fun. It's really an awesome honor to log in, to do the podcast and see so many people in the chat on at AmRadPod on YouTube and on Rumble. But I was a cop for over a decade and a half between local and federal law enforcement. That's my professional endeavor. And that was taken away because I said what we were doing with January 6th was wrong. And now I'm sitting here in a non-restrictive waistband. And the current director of the FBI is flying private everywhere. Half measures. Now let's do a compare and contrast, because half measures, I think, stink. You can't monitor what you're eating half the time. You can't show up to work half the time. You can't take the old lady out for Valentine's Day to Applebee's wearing your sweatpants. It's all or nothing. Well, here's the thing. When I want to talk about the football game, I have to throw out the flyover. That's Iran, dropping warheads on foreheads. I'm not going to comment on the foreign policy aspects to it, but I want to say one thing on it. It's a half measure. I don't know if one way or the other is the better, but we have chosen the half measure. Now go with me on this. For the flyover, where we're trying to get the crowd pumped up without having performed on the field, we got two options. No fence sitting on this one if you want to actually go for success. You could say, we are isolationist and we are not getting involved in this. That's one way. Or you could say, we are full on American empire and Iran is now the 51st state. But instead, we're getting half measures. We're saying, we're doing regime change, but not doing regime change. But we want new leaders there. And we want a leader who we like, who will do things that we like. And we'll probably have to leave some troops there to make sure we support him. But we're not doing regime change, and it's their own country. Well, that dog won't hunt either. Either make it the 51st state and pump all that black gold out of the ground, or don't get involved. Either way, it's your choice. But if you go with the half measure, that's how we get involved in a 2+ decade quagmire. I got history on my side to support it. I'm not a foreign policy expert. I haven't even said one way or another is the right way to go. But I do know this. Walking down the middle of the lane of the highway is a good way to get run over by a semi-truck. One last story I want to show you. The clear delineation. Choosing a side. No half measures. Go full commie or full freedom. Because I got to take every opportunity possible to tout my home state, the land of milk and honey, versus the communist enclave of California. So our final piece of the day comes from the Epoch Times. And the headline reads, 2 states, 2 visions. California wants to add a wealth tax. Florida wants to remove one. So California is trying now to pass the 2026 Billionaire Tax Act, which would impose a 5% tax on net worth of any California resident who's worth over $1 billion. Now, they have 200 billionaires in California because of all the tech stuff, and they think that it's going to raise $100 billion, with most of it going to Medi-Cal, which is state welfare for medical care. They also, if you recall your history a little bit about California, there was a time when they wanted to have an exit tax. They said, like, hey, if you were in California at any point over the last 10 years, you owe us taxes. So Joe Rogan leaves Florida or leaves California to go to Texas, he would owe taxes. And that was kind of stomped down because they're saying, like, hey, you know, this was in the days before they played college athletes. But if you were a football player and you were born in Los Angeles and then you wind up going to college in Ohio and then getting drafted to play in the National Football League and you're playing for the Miami Dolphins, where there's a zero tax state down in Florida, but it's within the last 10 years, then you would have to pay taxes to California. You can't do that. Now let's contrast it with my home state, where we're trying right now to put it on the ballot to get rid of property taxes, which is kind of a wealth tax. You own property, you got to pay tax on it every single year because of the value of that property. That is a wealth tax. Now, how is that going to be countered because the state raises money through property taxes? Well, the proposal is we're just going to cut spending. Objectively good. We might have to raise sales taxes, but if you are paying less in property taxes, you'll have the necessary funds to pay additional sales taxes. Plus, we got a lot of people vacationing down here in the land of milk and honey, so they can kind of carry the freight on some of the sales tax. So the burden will be less on the people who live here. Compare and contrast, and there's a reason, and they threw it out in this Epoch Times piece. Said over the past decade, California has lost over $14 billion of tax revenue, money that they steal from their tax base, from their citizens, because people have left the state. And Florida has gained $4 billion, and we don't even do a state income tax. Lots of people coming to Florida, much to my chagrin, because I really hate the traffic. All right. That's the end of the American Radicals podcast for today, guys. But I'm not going to leave you with that nice palate cleanse. And it's really kind of keeping in touch with our theme of no half measures. If you're going to chase down a bad guy and he's got a head start on you, pedal to the metal, even if you need to use an Uber.
Michael, you want to hop out of the car for me real quick? He's suspended. The car smells like weed. I'm just going to do a search. You don't need to go through my bag? Yeah, just leave it there. Leave it there.
Marquise, get the bag! Marquise, get the bag! Go get him, bro. Go get him. Run, bro! Let's stop fighting. Bro, it's a zip of weed, bro. Stop! I'll shoot! It's not that serious, bro. Hey, it's free. You good? Help! Stop! Stop! Get down! Get down! Get down! It's my bag. It's my bag. Put the phone down. Lay down on your stomach. Can you please say? Lay down on your stomach.
A drive-by tasing. That was awesome. All right, guys. Be back with you tomorrow, noontime, here on Rumble and on YouTube. And until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.